Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome back to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we are talking as a community about how the coronavirus is impacting the ways that we work. I'm Caroline Fairchild, editor-at-large at LinkedIn News, coming to you live from my home office here in New York City. Working parents are struggling. That is the main finding of a survey out this morning by LinkedIn that looked at how U.S. workers are coping with their mental health amid this pandemic. Some 74% of millennials are feeling stressed out during this time. This is the largest cohort in the workforce right now that has school-aged children at home. And we took a look at how women are feeling. The number one reason that women are feeling stress amid this pandemic is because of the added pressure of having to teach their kids at home while doing their day jobs as well. The number two reason is just a lack of work and home boundaries as these two spaces blur, as our non-essential workers start to work from their desks like I am right now. And look, these results, they are not surprising. This is a challenging time for all workers, even those who are fortunate enough to have a job right now. But there was an alarming finding of our survey that we are going to discuss on today's show, and it's of concern. And that's that 60% of employers have not accommodated work schedules for parents to allow them to make room for the added pressure of teaching their children during this challenging time. On today's show, we'll speak with two mental health experts who will help us unpack what this means for the future of work, what this means for mental health, and perhaps how we talk about these issues in the office. And before we bring on them, I want to have a conversation with you. Thank you for joining us on today's show. The whole point of this show is to have a conversation as a community about how the coronavirus is impacting the ways that we work. So if you're a parent right now on the stream, hello, thank you so much for joining us. Let us know what's going on the ground for you. If you're struggling with your mental health or talking with your manager about that, we want to share those insights as well. And if you have questions for our mental health experts who we'll bring on later in the show, please let us know and we'll get those answered right here on today's show. All right, earlier in this month, I had a chance to sit down with a very famous working mom to get her take on our survey and to see how she's parenting amid this pandemic. Actress Kristen Bell had this to share about the stress that she's feeling right now as she's parenting, as a lot of parents are, under remote work and under house arrest as well.
If I had to analyze how stressed I was about my life or my kids, my world before and after, I'd say I was moderately stressed before the pandemic of like, oh, okay, make sure everyone gets to school on time, make sure this gets done, make sure this gets done. And then when the pandemic hit, it was almost more because we had no outside sources to rely on. The first 2 weeks, I was trying to meet everyone's needs in my household because I'm codependent, and that's what my gut told me to do. Well, just make sure everyone's happy because this is a scary time. Then I realized I was completely losing myself. And in fact, it's been quite comforting to me to make my world a little bit smaller and really only have to communicate with the 10 people around me and have us decide what we do as a group in the evenings or play a game as opposed to having some event to run off to and all these sort of other variables that could cause stress.
And while Belle is known for being honest with her emotions, a majority of the workers that we surveyed do not feel the same way. Over half of workers told us that they do not feel comfortable having a conversation with their manager about their mental health during this time. And with that, I want to bring on our panel to discuss how we can mitigate some of this stress right now together. Right now on the show, we have Bea Arthur. She is the CEO of The Difference, as well as Maura Aarons-Mealy, who is the host of the HBR podcast. I can't see the whole title on screen right now. Maura, tell us the whole title.
The Anxious Achiever.
The Anxious Achiever. All right. Well, Maura, Bea, I've spoken with you both before. I'm so excited to unpack this survey on today's show. And Maura, I want to start with you. Let's talk about anxiety, which, stress is a symptom of. How prevalent was this before the pandemic? And how has this kind of impacted the ways that we talk about mental health at work right now?
Anxiety has always been prevalent. It's a natural part of being human. And in fact, moderate anxiety is an essential skill for getting ahead at work, for getting what we want in life, for achieving, and, for anything from mastering that 5K to getting a promotion. So some anxiety is good. And, anywhere from about a quarter of the population to more or less suffers at any given time from a clinical anxiety disorder. I think it's really natural for working parents to face anxiety on any given day. The pandemic has brought this to the fore, though, because all of a sudden the issues are so big. You know, if you're a parent with young children at home working through a global pandemic, you are caring for everyone in your life. This could include working parents. It could include people who work for you, of course, your spouse or partner, your children. You fear they all might die, get sick. You fear for your job. You fear for the future. Everything is just so much bigger right now that it's perfectly normal, even if you don't consider yourself an anxious person, to have tremendous anxiety. And that gets really hard when you have to continue meeting everyone's needs. Employers have to deal with this because, of course, bosses are anxious too.
I think everyone is anxious. And B, I know that you work particularly with a lot of millennials, and millennials seem to be the most stressed out generation right now, according to our survey. What are your clients telling you right now, and how has your business adapted to this increased mental stress that workers are feeling across industries?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, not just millennials, but obviously their employers. Obviously, employees are going through an unprecedented time. And whenever we look at anxiety from a mental health perspective, we have to understand that we're always talking about uncertainty. Anxiety is directly tied to uncertainty. So obviously in this age where every week, every day, every minute is different, everyone is feeling extremely anxious. And I think what's most helpful to break down for millennials in particular is that there's so many different phases. You've got frustration, doubt, fear, anger, and we all are going through it collectively. It's not just my generation. Everybody is adapting to this new normal, which hasn't been established yet. So it's kind of hard some days to get your head above water and feeling on solid ground to perform as a good employee.
And for those of you who are just joining the stream, this is Business Unusual, a live show where we're talking as a community about how the coronavirus is impacting the ways that we work. We're talking about a recent survey by LinkedIn that shows that the mental health of all workers is in jeopardy right now, particularly working parents. I want to say hello to some of the parents that we have on the stream with us right now. Deborah says, my sister-in-law teaches 11th grade and has 2 young children whose schoolwork she has to also manage. Deborah, sounds like a heavy load. Thanks for joining us on the show. Janelle says, I'm a parent of a kindergartner who has 52 online assignments due each week. 52 wow. For a kindergartner. Jessie, mom of 5, is also here. Amanda, single mom of 2, has tried schedules which help, but some days they go out the window. Totally normal. Thank you so much for joining us on today's show. And with that, Maura, I know that you have 3 kids and a puppy at home right now. Any advice? How are you managing personally? And what are some conversations that they say you've had with your family right now to try and deal with the mental stress of the current situation?
I have to tell you, I've been working from home for almost 15 years, and I find this situation impossible. I am crying in my bathroom daily. And I'm a pro at working from home. I even wrote a book about it. The problem is our boundaries are getting completely squashed. Even that teacher who had younger children at home and went to teach high school, she may have had a commute. She may have had breaks during the day. She may have been able to go to the gym after work sometimes, see friends. And those are all release valves for working parents. We don't have those anymore. Our boss is literally in our bedroom some nights because working hours aren't getting respected. So we're texting and we're emailing at work all hours. The boundaries are gone, and that makes us so stressed. And I feel it too. I'm yelling at my kids. I'm yelling at my husband. And the best thing I learned I can do for myself is be alone for a little bit every day.
I can't remember the last time that I was alone. B, boundaries. It's the number 2 reason that working women are stressed out right now, according to our survey. We've talked in the past about millennials already had problems with separating their lives from work and creating boundaries for themselves. And now those physical boundaries are gone as well. What does this mean in terms of how millennials think about their work moving forward and managing the stress of always being consumed in their jobs, which was an issue before this pandemic?
Exactly. I mean, the bottom line is we were already doing too much. Your kids, your job, it was already at unsustainable levels. So now that we see people are scaling back and, more importantly, trying to keep their jobs, you have people trying to take on more than they actually could. And unfortunately, even though the internet has been a fantastic thing, the human life never actually evolved with the acceleration of technical bandwidth. And so people who are already at their peak, especially people with kids at home, I'm really lucky. I'm a therapist, so people told me the truth about kids. So I feel really lucky to be able to be doing this isolation by myself. But yeah, it's really hard for parents and for kids. As Maura mentioned, it's literally impossible because we don't have good boundaries. And mothers especially, who want to put their children's needs above their own, are just really having a hard time kind of negotiating those priorities. And so what we see is people feeling like they're failing. But I mean, honestly, especially for kids between the ages of 10 and 18, I guarantee you this is harder for them. And so the most important thing that you can model for them is really excellent communication strategy, better boundaries, however they maintain them, social or physical, and their attachment patterns. They're really going to learn a lot through this, and especially that it will inform their coping strategies.
All right, so we've established that anxiety and stress is a very common illness among Americans. We've established that this pandemic even makes that even worse and harder for most Americans to cope with. But Maura, I wanted to ask you specifically about this finding in the survey that over half of workers don't feel comfortable talking to their boss about these issues that they're having. Help us unpack a little bit why it's so challenging to discuss mental health at work, and perhaps maybe a silver lining that this pandemic might push us to be able to do it more?
I really do think it will. That's the only silver lining I can see. You know, we are scared of our feelings, of our emotions, and discussing mental health at work because we think that someone who might admit to having an anxiety disorder is expressing weakness. And we feel, these are old stereotypes, you know, that go back to when it was only white men in charge, that our leaders must be strong at all cost, which is of course wrong. And all the data on leadership says that that's wrong. People actually respond to leaders who are warm and a little bit vulnerable and then also competent. But these stereotypes are, you know, really hard to die. And so most people would really rather jump off a cliff than tell their boss that they're struggling with anxiety. And that has to change because it's working for absolutely no one. When we don't get in touch with our anxiety and admit it, we act it out in all kinds of ways. And anyone who's ever worked can think of that coworker or boss who screamed at them, who snapped their head off, who, you know, acted out their feelings instead of really dealing with them. And I think that's times a million right now because we're all just scared.
We all are scared. And B, in terms of what your clients were telling you in terms of their ability to be comfortable talking about mental health at work, were these trends shifting in the right direction before this pandemic? And do you think that the pandemic will allow us to shift it even more? I was talking to Maura about how, say, 10 years ago, it was impossible for workers to talk about breastfeeding in the office. And now everyone talks about breastfeeding, so it seems. And now mental health is the next big hurdle. Do you feel like this pandemic will allow us to have more honest conversations about it at work?
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to see employers stepping up. Since the virus started, I've been in psychology technology for the last 10 years. And when corporations started to support mental health initiatives, initially it was about morale, productivity, employee retention, that kind of thing. And now it's more about, this is a moral obligation. You know, not just for their management teams, because think about it, when we do come back eventually to like whatever the hybrid is of remote work and in-person working, it's going to be like the prisoners running the prison, right? Everybody's used to working without pants. Everybody's used to working on their own schedule. So it's going to be very difficult for middle management, whatever that looks like in the future. And also just employees now are going to have abandonment issues. A lot of people got laid off that didn't expect it, shouldn't have. And so it's almost necessary. It's been really busy for us for people wanting to include corporate counseling as part of their, not just a perk, but insistence for their employees to maintain in order to have a mentally healthy company culture.
I think that's a great point. And I want to say hello to some more people who have joined us in the stream since we've started. This is Business Unusual, a live show where we're talking about the demands of parenting, the demands of mental stress for all workers right now amid this pandemic. Tamika says, for me, working from home is the only good option right now because I have school-aged children. I couldn't imagine trying to go into an office to work and deal with my kids being out of school. Working from home is a necessary evil for a lot of us right now. Tamika, that's a great point. Thanks for joining us. And then Andrea says, I think we all just have to lower our standards as parents, employees, and employers. I have for all three. I've heard that from so many executives across the board since this pandemic started. And I think it's such a valid point. So Andrea, thank you so much for sharing that as well. Okay, Maura, let's talk about solutions. I'm seeing in the stream a ton of workers, a ton of working parents saying that they're stressed out, particularly for the working women who, like Andrea, set themselves to such a high bar. What is your advice to them right now as they're trying to cope with the mental anxiety of this pandemic?
I think the first step is to really understand that it's okay to feel really anxious, distracted, scattered, angry, grief-stricken, everything that Bea mentioned. And if you're in a position at work to talk about that with your team, I beg you to do it. I think that we need game-changing leadership right now. And that is really about our leaders admitting this is scary. They don't have a crystal ball. They can't promise us what's going to happen in 6 months. What they can do, what any boss can do, what a teacher can do, what any manager can do is say, I feel this as well. We're going to get through this, and create that holding environment. That's leadership. That's what we need. And it starts with accepting that anxiety is normal, especially right now, and we can work through this. The other thing is around schedule. Employers cannot keep loading on the Zoom meetings and pretending like we are just at work at the office, except all in front of our laptops, right? It's just not going to work. People are going to get frazzled. Zoom is extremely frazzling and stressful, especially if you're an introvert. And we need to acknowledge that. So I think everyone needs to take a step back also and look at time and what can stay and what can go, frankly.
I think a lot of it can go. And I know the mother earlier on who had the 52 online assignments for her kindergartner feels the same way. I don't know what school is piling on the work, but I think work all around needs to be mitigated a little bit. Bea, in terms of how you were advising your clients before this pandemic and now how to manage stress, what's different? How do you deal with the Zoom meetings, with the manager who's in your bedroom, with the constant pings on Slack? I'm asking for a friend, and by my friend, I mean myself, but I mean, what's working?
Okay, Caroline's friend, here's the truth. That all of these issues come down to the common thread is access. Who has access to your time, energy, and attention? And right now, people who are very scared of being at risk of losing their jobs, and again, women for the first time ever are being recognized as providers. Even though, there's CEOs and female CEOs, for the first time, people are saying, yeah, we're providers, we work. But we still have or expect to carry the burden of childcare, unless you took your birth control like me. But basically, I would say, especially for people with children, it really is just about deciding who gets access to you. Slack, as much as I love them, if you have an email inbox, Slack, and all these other notifications, all it's going to do is distract you. Again, when we talk about what social media has evolved to our interpersonal communication, we have more conversations in our lifetime than like the last 18 generations. We have more friends than we ever did. We have more opinions than we ever did. And it's really up to you to kind of limit what gets into your mind, because it's all about how you talk to yourself right now. You really should just have one goal, and that's just to get yourself and your family to the other side of this in a mentally healthy and sustainable way.
Can I just add one thing real quick to Bea's great point, which is that you can limit your kids' access to your time too. I know that is like a parenting no-no in today's age, but it's okay to tell your kids to leave you alone, especially if you're spending 24/7 with them right now.
Right. And you can limit the inbound information that you're getting, say turning off your email or your Slacks, or hopefully setting some boundaries with your kids. In my case, with my puppy who's in his playpen right now. But I have a question in the stream right now from Tilda, who wants to know, how do you request healthy boundaries with a demanding employer? This is something that I've seen a lot of workers struggle with on the platform. Maura, any advice for employees who just have an employer who won't allow them to set these boundaries right now?
This is one of the toughest questions. And I'm a big believer, if your employer won't listen to you or their immediate team, who will they listen to? Is there an expert? Is there another CEO that they really admire? Is there a TED Talk, that will work? Show them examples of how this can make work better. And we are seeing those examples. There are leaders coming forward. I actually printed out the Canadian government, and I haven't fact checked this, has been sending out COVID-19 principles. And number 2, your physical, mental, and emotional health is far more important than anything else right now. So if you work for a different government or you work in the nonprofit sector in the US, you could say, well, Canada works pretty well, and here's their principles. Find other credible experts, other peers, other people who your boss trusts, and try to get that to make an impression, because, if they don't listen to you, they may not start now and it will stress you out.
And I think that's a great point. And our survey did find that 60% of employers are not accommodating the schedules of working parents right now, but that does mean that 40% are. I see Peter in the stream right now. He says, hello from Massachusetts, father of two, one with special needs. I'm grateful that my employer has been supportive during this pandemic, but this new norm has been very tough on everyone in my household. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. And B, for the employers who are doing something, what are they doing and why? How is it working for the workers who feel supported during this time?
Well, the best thing about this is that this has been the great equalizer, right? So as much as there has been a power imbalance and a power dynamic in corporate culture in America for a long time, this is really revealing that employers need us as much as we need them. And so to Maura's point, I'm sorry, but no is a complete sentence. One of the main things that's causing all the anxiety and fear and frustration is that feels like we've lost our locus of control. And so you do manage your schedule in the same way that you've had a meeting with somebody else. You can say, I have a hard stop at 7. We should all know wherever we are, what time the sun sets, what time the sun rises. You can get back and take control of your schedule. And any leader that doesn't understand right now isn't thinking about the long term. But again, even then, no is a complete sentence. You can really, really need to tell people how to treat you. And yeah, as far as that, I would just say, I don't know. This is for professionals, so no is a complete sentence.
No is definitely a complete sentence. And then Maura, in terms of the conversations, let's just say that you're a manager and you see that one of your workers is stressed out in a Zoom call and has kids in the back and the internet isn't working or whatever it is. But like we've discussed, there's still this stigma around talking about stress and anxiety. What's your advice for individual managers who may not be in workplaces that have robust policies to support parents right now, but at least in a one-on-one interaction can support them in a meeting?
My first step is to take it offline. I think that getting an email, text, or Slack message that says, "Are you okay?" from your boss is actually really anxiety provoking. So perhaps pick up the phone and ask, how's it going? Are you okay? If you are also struggling as a boss, as every boss is, with kids invading, puppies barking, the internet freezing, you could actually start with, this is hard. The other day, my internet wouldn't work and I was talking to a really important client. It stressed me out. I just wanted to check in. You don't need to pry. You don't need to cross privacy boundaries. But I think that actually having as human an interaction as we can right now, which means no email, no Slack, no text, picking up the phone and just saying, how are you doing? Want to make sure you're okay.
And B, before I let you both go, any advice for managers out there or employees like myself who are just stressed out and looking for answers?
I mean, yeah, the only thing is empathy is a requirement. Kindness and respect, no matter who you are talking to right now, you should try and lead with that at every time, because the only way we get through this is together.
That is a great point. And Kristen in the stream agrees. She's saying that we need leaders in the workplace and at home who are focused on raising healthy and loving families. Parents need to speak up and negotiate to build a family team who works together. We have the power and control. Let's claim it. Maura and B, thank you for joining us on today's show and helping us reclaim some of that power. It's always a pleasure speaking with both of you.
Thanks, Caroline.
All right, that was our panel of mental health experts helping us all unpack what it's like to be working amid the coronavirus and parenting in some cases as well. I want to thank them for joining us on today's show. But before I let you go, I wanted to end with a silver lining that actress Kristen Bell shared with me earlier this week about hopefully some stigmas and some prejudices against working parents that we'll see change coming out of this.
I'm also trying to be a very present mother, but there is this way we talk about stay-at-home moms like they don't do anything. And I think that is dead now. That's gone. That's over. No one will ever think that again. And I love that because there's so much to do when you're caring for a household. It is more than a full-time job. And I'm secretly loving the fact that the world is recognizing that now.
I'm loving that as well, Kristen, and I'm sure our panelists agree as well. Thank you so much for joining us today on Business Unusual. This is a live show coming to you Monday through Friday from 12 Eastern from the LinkedIn news page. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Tomorrow, I'm going to be sitting down with a very special guest, Armando Christian Perez. You may know him as Pitbull, to talk about his recent support of small business owners in the Hispanic community. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I hope that you join us as well. I'm Caroline Fairchild. Thank you so much.